Welcome to Good Game, I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo.
This week, the granddaddy of first-person shooters comes out of retirement with Wolfenstein, The New Order.
Hex, did you know that the original Wolfenstein was actually a stealth action game?
Why, yes, I did. Good factoid.
Oh, thank you. Also this week, we have a look at the steampunk-inspired Sir, You Are Being Hunted.
Plus, Goose becomes the 80s action hero he's always dreamed of in the side-scrolling brutality of Super Time Force.
But before all that, a little bit of extra challenge this week. Hex, can you name the games and what they all have in common?
Many games there. Well, let's get started with our first review.
Sir, You Are Being Hunted has been in beta for a while, but now it's finally been released into the wild. But is it worth the dosh, or are they selling us porky pies in a bag of tripe?
Gore blimey!
Perhaps some tea and biscuits from one of the nearby houses? The residents won't mind because they're not at home.
As the story goes, a mysterious machine has exploded, spreading parts all over the land. And it's up to you to retrieve all the parts and return them to a large rock. Because why not?
Yes, that's about the extent of the story. From that point on, it's a matter of survival. You're in a dystopian English countryside overrun with gentlemanly robots who are out for your hide.
Startled wildlife could help you to spot your pursuers.
You'll scour the countryside trying to find the parts, avoid the robots, and hopefully scavenge enough supplies to stay alive.
I'm sure you can master roasting game on an open fire.
The survival mechanics are pretty straightforward. You have a vitality meter that's constantly draining, so you need to eat regularly to keep it up. And as long as your vitality is high enough, you'll slowly regenerate health.
Personally, I felt the survival mechanics felt pretty light. Basically, you just have to scoff a few bits of beef throughout the game and you'll be right.
Yeah, but this isn't trying to be a hardcore survival sim where it's you against the elements. This is really about trying to outsmart and maneuver past those dastardly robots. And I think it works well for what they're trying to achieve.
Fair enough.
Oh dear, oh dear.
The world is split into 5 randomly generated islands, with the central island flanked by the smaller ones. The only checkpoints you get are when you use one of the boats between the islands, or at the big rock, so death can be pretty punishing if you haven't saved in a while.
And on each island, you'll find plenty of abandoned buildings and towns, which are more often than not filled with useless junk and poisonous food.
So it's always a bit of a thrill when you do find something useful, especially if it's a new gun or a few precious bullets.
A weapon?
Although I thought it felt a bit cheap how there's no interiors to any of the buildings, you just search them by clicking on doors. I guess I just always love going into people's houses and rifling through their drawers though.
I think there are some really strong ideas here, maybe just not executed as well as they could have been. For example, the game's main mechanic of being hunted isn't quite right. It's more like, sir, we are guarding the things you need to find and we'll only hunt you if we see you, but we'll give up if you run away.
Not the catchiest title though, is it?
No, but it's more accurate. It's an accurate title.
You hear something? It's over there. Lost and lighter, lighter. Keep looking.
You just think there would maybe be a bit more tracking behavior in the AI, or just something that actually made you feel hunted. Instead, the robots do really simply stand around the useful things and randomly patrol the islands.
Yeah, another thing I found is that you can kind of break the game's difficulty system.
Excellent. We're making progress. You might survive this after all.
Basically, every time you deliver a piece of the machine to the big stone, things get gradually harder with bigger, scarier types of robots coming into play. If you want though, you can just round up and store each piece in a nearby house and then turn them all in one go right at the end.
Excellent. You've done it.
Kind of goes against the whole spirit of the exercise though, Hex. Not very sporting of you.
Oh, it's cheating for sure, but still it's in the game and it felt like a bit of an easy exploit.
Well, fair enough. And it is a pretty brutal game by default. Once you're spotted, your best option is usually just to run. If you fight, not only will you run out of bullets, but the noise will draw more robots to you.
I did love the variety of enemies. Things start off with just basic robots with shotguns, then balloons come, and then dogs, and then these lanky guys, and then the polo players on rocket-powered horses. They really keep you on your toes, don't they?
My favourite enemy was the creepy Watson Scarecrow. Just turn around and he's there. Go away. Also, those tentacles coming out of the ocean can go away.
It's also really satisfying when you pull off a good bit of stealth action. Slowly sneaking through tall grass and using a distraction to nab a machine part right under the noses of some robots.
Yeah, and running for your life and hearing that bullet ping past your head always gets the heart pumping.
There are some nice ideas here. They may not always have worked as well as I would have liked, but overall I enjoyed my romp through this terrifying countryside, so I'm giving it 7.
I liked the look of this game. Parts of it look rough, but it still manages to sell an impressive range of moods. Still, it never really delivered on that being hunted promise. So I'm giving it 6 out of 10. And now it's time for a news report with Goose.
Thanks, guys. Xbox developer Rare has seen a number of high-profile layoffs following the poor reception of its latest release, Kinect Sports Rivals. There has been speculation about the future of the Kinect-focused developer since Microsoft made the Kinect an optional accessory earlier this month. Among the reported 16 redundancies is Chris Sutherland, who had been an employee at the company for more than 20 years. Sutherland is best known for his work as lead programmer on Battletoads and for his voice work in the Banjo-Kazooie games. Nintendo has disabled a number of Wi-Fi services for the original Wii and Nintendo DS. As of May 20, online play, voice communication, and leaderboard access will no longer be possible on the consoles. At this point, Nintendo stores, internet browsing, and videos on demand remain accessible. The Dota 2 prize pool for the International 2014 has reached a staggering $6 million, making it the largest in esports history. This hefty prize owes its size in large to community funding. $2.50 from each sale of the event's interactive tournament guide, dubbed the Compendium, is contributed to the kitty. At the time of reporting, this has seen a $4.4 million increase in just 11 days. And this seems like a good time to throw to Goose for some esports news. Thanks, Goose. Battle Arena Melbourne, one of the nation's largest fighting game events, took place earlier this month. Hundreds of players converged to compete in more than 10 games for the iconic BAM Boxing Glove Trophy and over $10,000 in cash and prizes. Being the first Australian event in the Capcom Pro Tour, competition was fierce. Throughout the day, victors emerged across Killer Instinct, Injustice, Tekken Tag Tournament 2, Dead or Alive, King of Fighters, and Smash Bros. Brawl. But the most anticipated event of the day was the Super Street Fighter IV Finals. Vying for a trip to Singapore to compete in the Southeast Asia Majors, the final of the 80-player Street Fighter IV event was SL Soul over DB Toxie, who had won the Third Strike tournament earlier. His Beast Mode Akuma wasn't enough to overcome Soul's Kami to take out the top prize at the 6th annual event. And that's all the news for this week.
Probably have to be the original Final Fantasy for Nintendo. When that game came out, I locked myself in the basement for about 5 days straight until I got through the entire game. And I've been a fan of the Final Fantasy series ever since, but Nintendo in general, I nerded out on everything Nintendo as a kid. And I kept a list of the 200 plus games that had taken me 2 days or less to beat, and there was about 5 games at the time that had taken me longer, Final Fantasy being one of them.
In Super Time Force, you take control of a super team of time-bending heroes who force their way into history by using their superpower of time travel. The story follows Dr. Rapitsky, who, after discovering the secret of time travel, inadvertently destroys the whole world before coming back to inform his past self of his mistakes. This over-the-top version of the Doctor now leads a crack team across time to rectify his mistakes by battling the mysterious Dr. Infinity, as well as making the world cooler by altering historic events like the extinction of the dinosaurs, and even going forward in time to download all future plugins and updates for his web browser. It's ridiculous, nonsensical, rife with paradoxes, and freaking hilarious. And at no point does this ludicrous story pretend to be anything other than what it is, an awesome excuse to bounce around all different corners of the space-time continuum. From the medieval Dark Ages right up into a Mad Max-inspired apocalypse. All of these missions are full of retro 80s throwbacks and pop culture references, even including a cast of unlockable characters, each with their own brilliant parody name. I love this tongue-in-cheek approach that even flows into the game's design, going with that ever-popular pixel art style and chiptune music which is perfectly suited to this insane time-travelling adventure. Starting out, you can pick from one of the three main heroes, a Scottish sharpshooter, Amy McKillen, a machine gun-toting action hero, Jean Rambois, and a shield-wielding blocker, Shieldy Blockerson. Every hero has a basic and charged attack, but what's unique is your ability to combine these powers when you go back in time and save yourself from being killed. Oh, wait, I've forgotten to mention that. Okay, hang on one sec. Rife with paradoxes and freaking hilarious. This looks like a good spot. So, what makes the game so unique is the time out ability, which allows you to rewind and add another character to your previous playthrough. Initially, this serves as a substitute for lives, sending you back every time you die, which will happen frequently thanks to old school one-hit kills from your enemies. Should you then be able to save your previous self from getting killed, you can then absorb them. This then gives you an extra hit point as well as their attack power, making for some great experimentation. For example, save Amy with Shieldy's block, and he can now use her charged up laser attack while still dropping his original bubble shield. Very useful. Later on down the track, you realise you have to use this timeout ability to either multiply your attack power or to clear multiple enemies that would be impossible to defeat on a single run. The creative boss battles in particular stand out as moments of pure chaos as you shoot, rewind, appear, shoot, rewind, appear, until the screen is filled with a crazy amount of bullets and sprites. This looks particularly impressive at the end of each level when you can watch a clean version of the gameplay with the rewinds removed. Overall, it's a unique mechanic that feels fun and clever to use at the same time, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was a little bit overpowered. Knowing I had so many rewinds at my disposal definitely took out some of the challenge and meant that I rarely needed a full reset. Luckily, to counter this, the game employs a clever countdown timer for each stage, urging players to push through areas quickly or to rewind and defeat enemies faster to reach the end goal within the time limit. There's also extra time pickups, hidden slow-mo power-ups, and extra rewinds to help you along the way. And you'll need to keep a constant eye out for these, or else you may find yourself out of time and be forced to rewind all the way to the beginning of the level. It actually turns out that time is your biggest enemy in the game, with escort stages and the aforementioned boss battles requiring you to rewind and squeeze as much damage as possible into mere seconds. And while you can strategically rewind to direct your fire at specific enemies and preempt boss attack patterns, it usually just ends up being easier to go back and add more and more heroes until nothing stands a chance of surviving. And that's really my biggest problem with the game. The chaotic nature of having just so much happening on screen at once can detract from the usual simplistic side-scrolling joys. Don't get me wrong, it's a great twist on the genre. Almost as if someone saw the multiple playthroughs in Super Meat Boy and decided to combine that with an old-school Contra shooter. However, the resulting frenzied playstyle can wear a bit thin by the end. Even more unfortunate was the missed opportunity for any cool time-bending puzzles. I only encountered one, and that was in the final stage of the game, that made me really stop and think, "Oh, that was really cool, I wish there was more of that." But I guess this game is selling itself as a shooter first, so I'm glad it sticks to what it does best. In the end, just like the questionable time paradoxes it opens up, Super Time Force is probably best enjoyed when you're not thinking about it too hard. It's not overly long, so it's great for short burst sessions before coming back to hunt down collectibles, go for speed runs, or just create as many multiples of yourself as possible. I had a great time with this game, so I'm giving it...
Goose, we have to get out of here. It's the future we've got from the past.
Everyone, shush! I'm giving it 8.5 rubber chickens. Here for my first day. What's going on?
Thanks, Goose. Well, it's been over 20 years since Wolfenstein 3D defined what first-person shooters could be, and that landmark game cemented mechanics that we see in pretty much every shooter today.
Since then, though, the series has struggled to remain relevant and never really overtaken its successors. That all changes with Wolfenstein: The New Order.
Steel. Stone. Concrete for miles. I wonder if there's anything in this world worth saving. It comes down to it, I'll fight alone. And I promise you this. I will find you.
Wolfenstein: The New Order starts off as a fairly bland and generic shooter. Take out some Nazis, a bunch of turret sections, and some fairly standard grey wartime visuals. Falling through the world in the first mission didn't help either. But then all of a sudden, that all changes. I started to care about the characters.
Where's Johnny Cowboy?
The gameplay and levels became exciting and varied. And then by the end, I was more than won over, and Hex, to be honest, a little emotional.
It was a real surprise, wasn't it? Yeah. Let's start with the story.
Everything has gone to shit. The Nazi war machine is advancing at an astonishing rate.
In an alternate timeline to our own, the Nazis won World War II. They've taken over much of the globe, mostly thanks to their unusual technological advancements.
You are once again William Blazkowicz, whose face still looks remarkably similar to the little icon we saw on our screens 20 years ago. An attempt to take out the Nazi general Death's Head leaves William brain damaged and lost at sea. He's quickly found and sent to an asylum to recover. And it's here where the unexpected character development really begins.
Yeah, suddenly you realise these cutscenes have style and purpose and are full of subtle imagery and themes.
Count to 4. Inhale. Count to 4. Exhale.
Yeah, and I found those slower story-based areas were full of colour and likeable characters, and they were just warm. But when it got to the action, it was always cold, dark, clinical, and dangerous.
I got the sense that there were some really clever design choices made to encourage you to feel a certain way at a certain moment in the game.
Yeah, I literally sat up in my chair in that hospital scene and said, okay, that's pretty cool.
Here's what I know. I'm in Poland. A hospital. No, an insane asylum. She's the head nurse. That's her father. Shrink. And her mother. Some type of pharmacist. They run the place, I reckon. Sometimes Christmas. Sometimes birthdays. And sometimes Nazis come. And they leave with patients in shackles.
What surprised me most was how much I cared about the relationship between Blazkowicz and his love interest, Anya. You know, romance is not the kind of thing you normally associate with this kind of action shooter.
One more thing. It's quite critical.
What?
As things progress, you start to understand that she is the only light in his life. She saved him and brought him back to the world.
That'll be all. We can go now.
They managed to do this in only a handful of cutscenes. The storytelling never overstays its welcome.
Yeah, this game knows it's a shooter, but just having that little bit of extra depth in the story is so nice.
Plus, they have a pretty raunchy sex scene.
Oh.
I want this. With you.
This game is also made by new Swedish developer Machine Games, who formed in 2009 with former members of Starbury Studios, known for the Riddick games and also The Darkness.
They've done a pretty good job of extrapolating this timeline without getting too silly, which could have been the way that it went.
In English, you couldn't call it, how's it? Spindly talk.
There's little reference to the 2009 Wolfenstein game. This one focuses less on occult and magic and more on raw machinery and science, which I think is a better fit for the series.
The Nazi technology is really interesting, both just to look at and fight against.
Yeah, and the villains are terrifying, aren't they?
And fucking brutal. The Nazi oppression takes many forms. It's often violent and always hurts the innocent. They don't pull their punches, do they?
No, and a bit of a gore warning here. There's a lot of giblets in this game and a lot of stabbing. Dogs, Nazis, everyone is up for stabs. And when those dogs come at you, it's full on.
Yeah, all that close quarters stuff is really intense and especially stressful when you get involved in one of those stab tussles.
This is a violent shooter, and if you're not into that, then this will shock you more than once. But at the same time, there's also a contrast because there is a dark sense of humour to the game as well.
This is a small criticism because it really is only in 2 or 3 instances, but I do feel like some of the stabs were a bit gratuitous.
Yeah, but I don't think it glorifies the mechanic or the action, though. In fact, I thought they worked really hard to make this melee work better than most other shooters, where it usually just feels a bit tacked on and clumsy.
Yeah, but I think there's a way to keep that impact there without having the character revel in the gore of it so much. But yes, the mechanic itself does work well, especially when stealthing and trying to hunt down and take out guards who will set off alarms.
There's good challenge in the fights, and quite often you'll be presented with a scenario that'll make you stop and think, how will I get through this? I thought everything about the gunplay was really polished.
Yeah, at first I was a little bit disappointed with the relatively small variety of weapons. And in fairness, there isn't a whole lot new to talk about when it comes to gunplay. But I like that the upgrades really do mix things up and they aren't handed to you. You have to seek them out, which encourages exploration. Plus, weapons all have alternate fires as well. But best of all, you can dual wield everything.
Yes. Shotguns, pistols, laser rifles, even knives and sniper rifles can be held in 2 hands.
Double shotguns is pure destruction, isn't it, Bajo? Especially with the flak upgrade.
But best of all, it all feels really balanced. If you dual wield, you move much slower and you can't aim down sights. So it's good if you're taking out tough enemies or going on a rampage, but not so useful if you're picking your way carefully around a map.
There's also a cutting tool called the Laser Kraftwerk. This lets you find alternate routes and hidden pickups. It can be a little bit fiddly to use, but it also doubles as a giblet-making railgun.
This game likes to stick to its old school roots a little. Ammo, health packs and armor are sprinkled all over the place. In the past Hex, I might have said that is a little bit of lazy game design, but I actually liked it here. It worked really well. I felt like after each fight I was gearing up and patching up, ready to move on to the next one. I'm also glad you only get partial health regeneration too. You can't just sit in a corner and suck your thumb and regenerate completely. You just have to do a bit better, or maybe take a few risks.
Yeah, it works well, and if you pick up extra med packs, you enter overcharge. It'll tack that onto your current health and start ticking back down. It's great because it encourages you to go on a hero's rampage, but it also helps when facing tough foes.
I also thought it was a nice touch that you can pick off armor that you've shot off enemies and add that to your own. Especially off the giant mechs and robots, and those fights were, I think, my favourite. We played this on PS4, and the controls are very polished too. The kickback of weapons, the character movement, it all still has that old school feel, but totally modern at the same time. I'm also impressed in how far shooter controls have come. Normally I'm a bit of a mouse and keyboard snob when it comes to FPS, but after 10 minutes with this controller, I even forgot I was using it. I also like the level design.
Yes, I love that it's not completely linear. Along with all the upgrades and gold to find about the place, you're often presented with more than one path, but it feels reasonably organic within the level rather than just here's a vent, here's a door. It's pretty rare that I got lost.
Yeah, and they do a good job of seeding excitement for future missions as well. Hex, it's not often that I actually want to get to the end of an FPS single-player campaign, other than just for the sake of it, but with this one, I needed to see it through. I wanted to help this ragtag team of resistance fighters achieve their objective. And you don't get the sense that this is the final battle either. You're on a mission to merely dent the Nazi machine, and it's not going to be easy, and not everyone is going to make it through.
Someone needs to go in there and find him. Go undercover.
Any volunteers?
By the end, I was so impressed with how slowly they reveal all the team's personalities to you. They're not just blank character models in a room, they all have stories and care about things within the limitations of a shooter.
Sorry about your legs. Don't be. I've learned how to fly.
I was so moved by some moments, Hex, and by the end, I was even a little bit emotional. From a Wolfenstein game, I even had to put the controller down and tip my hat and say, well played, game.
Yeah, it feels weird, doesn't it? But at the same time, I really hope more shooters take this kind of care with their story.
Yeah, me too. There's no multiplayer component to this game, but I think we're actually kind of glad about that.
Yeah, I'd much rather have a strong single-player campaign that I actually want to finish than some tacked-on multiplayer. There isn't a whole lot to criticize about this game. It doesn't reinvent the genre, but it's not trying to. There are times when the enemies are intelligent and formidable, but there are also some rough animations and questionable AI moments. You know, like when enemies do that sidestep walk towards you.
Yeah, it's kind of like their top half is running independent from their bottom half.
But overall, I thought this was a really solid game, so I'm giving it 8.5.
Yeah, it's not revolutionary, but in a way I found it revitalizing. The New Order does what so many shooters should be doing. I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Hey, darling. How about we go for a spin? Okay. Back to work.
So did you guess the game?
For this week!
They were Frogger, Gallagher, Ms. Pac-Man, and Donkey Kong. Some of the most iconic arcade titles of all time that set the standard for years to come. And it's our Name the Games for this week because they were all released in 1981, the same year as the very first Wolfenstein game, Castle Wolfenstein. What a great year for games, Hex.
Chock full of facts right here on Good Game. Next week on the show, who lets the dogs out? We do, when we review Watch Dogs.
You let the dogs out? I've been thinking about that all week.
Yeah.
Plus, from the makers of Bastion, we tune into the future of Transistor.
Over on Spawn Point, our show for younger gamers on ABC3 this weekend, we're having a slumber party when we review Mario Kart 8.
So until next week, Bajo out.
Hex out. Ooh, let the dogs out. Woof, 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 woof. Sing it with me.
You know, I didn't actually realize that was the dog noise. The hoo, hoo. I didn't
Really?
realize. I thought they were just saying hoo.
Baja
over and over
Men?
again.